Hi, and welcome to another Finance and Procurement Coffee Break. We're here with Richard again, who is back from his travels.
I know. Well, yeah, and I've still got, I've got a cup of coffee. I've got a blurred background because I'm in my office, which having just moved house, well, having not just moved house, 5 weeks ago, it's still a tip. And so I've blurred it, and the clothes I'm wearing are the only clothes I can find because everything else is in the wall. So there we go. But we'll get back to a shared venue for the next session. But look, great to see you again, Claire.
Yeah, likewise. So today we're going to discuss ERP planning and implementation. And when I say ERP, if you haven't heard that phrase before, by that I mean replacing your systems and technology that you use to manage a company. Now, these projects are normally expensive enough, but when not properly managed, they can take longer than expected and experience significant cost overruns, and in a worst case scenario, cause business and customer disruption. Believe it or not, if you can Google this, but Gartner, the research company, estimates that between 55 and 75% of all ERP implementations fail to meet their objectives. Now, this is something I've blogged about in the past. If you look under my LinkedIn profile and under articles, there's something written short blogs on in the past. But they cite the four biggest reasons for failure are resistance to change, inadequate sponsorship, unrealistic expectations, and poor project management. Many well-known companies have established, have implementation failures. So I thought today it might make an interesting discussion to have a quick chat about, our experiences in this area and what makes them challenging. So Richard and myself have had a fair share of system implementations, mostly myself with SAP and Microsoft Dynamics. Also done some Oracle implementations as well. I would say probably the most popular systems from a finance point of view would tend to be SAP for the larger corporates and FMCG businesses, probably Microsoft Dynamics for the smaller mid-cap. So obviously other ERP systems exist, but I would say that those two tend to be very popular.
Right, okay.
So Richard, when implementing new systems such as SAP Ariba for procurement, for example, it's a great system when properly implemented, but in your experience, what leads to suboptimal implementations and cost overruns? What have you seen happen in the past?
I've seen some spectacular failures. I've also seen some good ones as well. And look, I think, to me, we're going to talk about, big implementation like, SAP Ariba. But this is just the same for a small bit of technology. I mean, you're bringing in a bit of BI software. It's exactly the same principle, just a different scale. And when we were sort of chatting about this, I like you, I made a quick list of all the things. By the way, I checked myself using ChatGPT, which is far smarter than I am, and it came up with a similar list. But interestingly, I'm going to offer a different perspective in a minute. So look, the standard things that lead to either success or failure kind of link back to lots of the things we've talked about in the previous coffee breaks. Having a vision, a clear goal. What is the software for? What are you trying to achieve with the ERP implementation? And what does that mean? It means if you're introducing SAP Ariba in finance, that's one thing. If you're trying to introduce SAP Ariba in procurement or supply chain or manufacturing, it's a completely different thing. It might be the same software provider, but it's got different challenges and different things. So what is your goal? All the good stuff about leadership, project management, communication, change management. We'll talk about, I'll come back to training and education in a minute. Yes, they all matter. But do you know what? Most of the times I've seen people implement stuff, they've got all of that covered. The goals, that's the bit that creeps. The leadership management, that's all fine. But actually, when I sat back again and I thought, really, what are the things that I've seen why things have gone wrong? And it came actually down to four things. Scope, so taking baby steps and not trying to implement a solution to solve your entire business process in one go. Whatever you're doing, making sure that you have kept your communication with stakeholders so that they support you and can help you iron out problems. And then for me, the two really big ones: do not try to implement any software until you have sorted your data. And don't rely on the software you're buying to sort it for you. You've got to do it as a preparation. If you don't, you will fail. And I've talked about this on LinkedIn. And then the last one, and this comes back to scope. I know it's hard, but there's a reason why vanilla solutions are easy. Don't customize, because the minute you customize, not only are you introducing things that could go wrong, but you're also introducing big problems when you come to update your software in the future, because no matter what the promises are, it will never quite accommodate whatever customization you've done. And I often think you're better off picking a piece of software and then adopting whatever is the vanilla process than taking a piece of software and customizing it to match your process. So, never mind the generalist. Those would be the big four for me. Take baby steps. Keep your stakeholders on side, clean your data before you start, and don't customize. I mean, they would be, my big ones. And I suppose, look, all of that, both the sort of the standard list and my little list, I think we both agree they're common sense. But do you know what? Things still fail. And, I guess, let's hear it from your side of the fence, because you've seen a lot of implementations in finance. What is it that you think makes it go wrong?
Yeah. So one of the things I've seen quite a lot is that people will look at a system implementation purely as a system implementation. So that point that you said about your vision, I know when you say, well, what's your vision, people can think, oh, that's a bit woolly, but in terms of having a target operating model, if you think through all the layers of a target operating model, of which only one of the 6 layers, so it's typically 6 layers of a target operating model, only one of those is technology. And so if you look at a system implementation purely as just an IT issue, then you're not really going to get transformation. And the other issue is that the rest of the company and the rest of the stakeholders who are not sat in an IT function are likely to be on a different page to you in terms of what good looks like and what the future should look like. So again, linking to our first coffee break, I would say having a target operating model of which systems and technology is one layer of that target operating model is a must if you're really going to transform your business and keep everyone aligned on that journey. Agreed. I think the other things that can go wrong, and this is something I've blogged about in the past, is not choosing the right implementation methodology, which is something that doesn't come up if you ask ChatGPT. But in my experience, it is quite important. So in recent years, there's been a big sort of shift towards agile methodologies, and I think they're great if you use them for the right purposes. So they're great if you have, for example, when it comes to software, a core solution that's already developed and stabilized, and you're wanting to sort of roll out incremental improvements to it over time. For example, an app is a great example. If you have an app on your phone, or you've got an app that your customers can use, and you want to just make incremental improvements over time, an agile methodology where you're putting so many requirements into a sprint and deploying it every 2 weeks or every month, that's a great methodology to use. The problem with an agile approach is that you only really, and linking to your point, scope the requirements when they're brought into a sprint. So for that reason, I don't feel it's an appropriate methodology to use if you're doing a large-scale greenfield ERP implementation, because to really know how long and how much money a large
Yeah.
greenfield implementation would take, you really need to know the scope of it up front.
Yeah.
So let's, for example, say that you've got, you've been on the acquisition trail, you've bought lots of other companies over a period of time, and you realise that actually now is the time to consolidate all these companies onto one platform, use one global process, as I've seen many times in other companies. If you're going to basically get rid of all your legacy software that you've got at the moment and replace it with one global platform, I would suggest a waterfall methodology. So that's where you start by scoping the project up front. It's much better because you get much more firmer sense of how long it will take, what the requirements are, how long will it take to build. So that's one of the things that I've seen go wrong in the past. And then the other thing that I've seen go wrong quite a lot is people kind of know that you should have change management and you should have people leading change management. But the thing that goes wrong is that it gets pushed and pushed and pushed, and then often you'll have a change manager joining such a project like midway through or towards the end, and then it's like a mad scramble to work out what's the change impact, notify what people's roles will be changing, update global policies and procedures, and it results in a really bumpy landing for the end users, your employees. So I don't think that people just ignore change management anymore. I don't, we've lifted it as one of, I think people do recognize it, but I think they deprioritize it. And think it's kind of a nice to have, but then at the end they kind of realize actually we should have done this earlier, but we didn't.
You're right.
And then linking to your point, Richard, on data, and we said, like, just because you buy a new system, let's say you've decided you're going to implement SAP. SAP, the implementation of this technology is not going to get your data clean or tell you how your data should be structured. So another thing that I've seen many a time is that when people start their ERP implementation, they realize that they will need an accounting data model that will be more structured in a lot better way to facilitate reporting than they have had in the past. And then they realize in the past they've had loads of holes in their data where their systems haven't been joined up or whatever. And so both the design of that accounting data model, so the chart of accounts, the dimensions, and basically how you're going to capture data through the ERP system and then spit out reports and key metrics at the end, that data model often takes longer, or that they just were not adequately resourced to actually design it in the first place. And so as a result of that, the data model taking longer and the cleansing of the data taking longer than you can be up to 6 months or more delayed with an ERP implementation just on those two things alone. Yeah, I think the final thing I would say is, again, and I feel like it's people know that they can't really do this, but again, they try to somehow get away with it, is they expect people to still do their day job, their 9 to 5 job, and fully participate in a project.
Exactly. Yes.
And even though they know, actually, we need to backfill some staff to allow them time to work on said project and be a subject matter expert, for this area. They somehow think that somehow, I don't know, some sort of magic fairy will take care of their work or something. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
But but the outcome is that those employees end up feeling really stressed and do neither job, neither being an SME on the project or doing their day job very well. So they're kind of failing at both in the end. So again, I would say it's a bit like the change management bit. People know they should do it or they shouldn't do it, but they still think, oh, maybe I can just push it.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, so that's it from my perspective, Richard. So we've had a sort of run through of what can go wrong and why.
What goes wrong? Yeah.
So why don't we finish the session by explaining what a typical ERP implementation plan looks like? What are the phases and why?
Right. So let's focus on what we can do to make it go right.
Yeah.
So look, again, you could look this up. You can go and type anything in Google, phases of a project. So let's just bring it to real based on what we've said. First up, requirements, scope, vision. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? And you should spend a lot of time nailing that down and agreeing it with everybody so that you don't end up, as you said, halfway through the project with an important stakeholder turning around and saying, well, I thought it was going to do this. Well, which is a disaster, because then you're trying to catch up with different expectations. So nail the requirements. What is it you're trying to solve? And like I said, baby steps. Don't try and solve the world in one go. Secondly, once you've nailed the requirement, again, procurement are going to be a big partner in this, is selecting which system you're going to go for. Yeah, it might be SAP, it might be Oracle, it might be Microsoft, it might be IBM. There are other systems out there. And if you're not a global corporate, there is increasingly a lot of choice out there. And it's a bit like any relationship. It's what's the best fit. So, you should go to the market saying, well, look, we've nailed the requirements. This is what we think we want. What's out there and how closely does it match? And if you're lucky, everything's looking good. And if not, fine, you have to make some decisions and trade-offs. Big thing here, and you talked about the right implementation partner, but that implementation partner can help you at this point. Getting an SME who really understands the capabilities of the different alternatives out there can help you go through that selection. So once you've decided, the rest of it is pretty standard. You're going to design it, you're going to configure it, you're going to test it, you're going to train it, you're going to deploy it, support it, maintain it. But let's just think about what the important bits are. If you've got a good partner, and all of the big players have got their gold and platinum implementation partner network, you should spend almost as much time finding the right partner that's a good fit with you, that understands your business, what you're trying to achieve, the quirks that you've got, so that they can work with you to make sure the solution delivers the requirement, that problem you're trying to fix. And you know what? Yes, you should do good project management, but ultimately you're not the expert. They are. So let them get on with their job. Don't try and do it for them, which often, you see a lot of project teams asking for detail. That why? Testing is important. Yes, very easy to test whether you can do it. In my world, purchase request, purchase order, goods receipt, I could test that and it looks golden. But you should test it for all the funnies. And, I'll give you a good example in the procurement world. I was on a SAP sourcing implementation, and do you know what defeated it? It was defeated because we'd cleaned our data and then we had a blanket order that was being drawn down over 3 years. We'd cleaned the data, which meant it looked at the blanket order. It didn't recognize the vendor number. It didn't recognize the purchase order. It had no clue what that was. So think about not just the standard use cases, but think about the strange ones, because they're the ones that
the unhappy path.
Yeah, exactly. The
I call it,
path.
because everyone thinks of the main cases, the happy path. But then it can be the sort of the 10 or 20% of cases that don't follow the normal process.
Exactly right.
And you've either got to have a process for those unhappy cases that are in the system, and if for any reason that you decide you don't want to make specific customizations to accommodate them, then what is the business process for that unhappy path?
Exactly. And listen, it could be, I mean, I've seen it so many times where, you create the standard process and then you've got this unhappy path and you think, oh, I've got to come up with some kind of workflow to make it work. And you spend more time on that ridiculous workflow for the 1 in 1,000 use case. Actually, why not just have a pop-up that says, if you're trying to ship something to wherever, which is really complicated from a regulatory and an import-export, just put a pop-up that says, go and speak in person to finance and supply chain and resolve this as a special case. Why not just do that? Rather than try and come up with it. Now, the other thing about testing, one of the things that's really going to make your implementation successful are key users, because key users are the ones that are going to be your communication channel. They're going to train the wider user population. They're going to be doing the updates. So use testing as an opportunity to get your key users comfortable with how it works, because if they are, they're going to be able to do a better job, and they can then help with that next bit, which is the training, both for them and to admins, but also when you do the deployment and you've got that big rollout, they're going to have that big support. And look, this is, as you know, with Eruditic, this is where I'm working with software companies in the procurement space to make sure that the way you train makes sense to the people that are going to use it. Because if it's easy, you're going to get better adoption. And I will make a little side comment here to all of you software companies out there, if you're watching. The reason why Amazon is used by so many people is because nobody ever needed any training to work out how to do it. I can execute the complete procurement process in Amazon to buy my coffee, and no one needs to help me. So if you're a software provider and you need a 3-month training program with 20 interventions, probably time to look in the mirror and work out what you're doing wrong, because you shouldn't be needing to train people that much. And then look, right, so you've got it out, you've got there. The two last things, support and maintenance. Everybody needs support as they go live and they use it. So make sure you've got the infrastructure, whether that's key users, third-party support, service desk, whatever, to help people fix problems quickly. And then don't forget about maintenance. It's like a car. You can buy a nice new car, but if you don't look after it, in a year's time, 2 years' time, you're going to start to have problems. And it's the same with software. There are updates, even if it's just cybersecurity patches, or they're bringing in new regulation, you've got to keep on top of it. And there's I did a webinar with with Optima recently, where they said, don't trust your software company to do that. This is your software, your license. You need to be confident it's up to date and working. So therefore, find the right partner to help you do that. But I'm going to come back to those big 4 things, which are, as you go through that journey, if you've got the scope right, the requirements, you're taking baby steps, if you've sorted your data, if your stakeholders understand it, aligned and support you, and you minimize customization, all of those things are going to be far easier and quicker to deliver. And just as a final thought, you mentioned whether agile is appropriate or not. There is a little bit of the agile mindset which I think is relevant, and it comes back to this point about baby steps, which is just implement each baby step quickly, make sure it works and make sure everyone's happy, then implement the next bit. So if you're going to be rolling out SAP Ariba as a complete one-stop solution for all the functions in your organization, don't do it in one go. Start with the data model and the data, get that in, make sure that's all happy and you're good with it. Then start with finance, then go to procurement, then go to whatever it is. Just do it, that agile mindset of, I'm going to do this bit, I'm going to check I'm happy, and then I'm going to progress to the next stage. And if not, I'm going to row back, get it right before I try and get it more. So I think there's a little bit of that mindset, not as a development, but as an approach to being sure as you walk through the whole implementation that everything's going the way you want. So long answer, but this is a big challenge, right? And if it goes wrong, holy Mosey, you're in trouble. It's I mean, this is planet killing stuff.
And linking to your point on testing, one of the things that I would say when you're doing your testing is what you should ensure when you're doing your testing. So we discussed about the sort of the happy part and the unhappy part, but I always say like focus on the things that are the lifeblood of the business. So lifeblood of the business, getting cash in from customers, getting cash out to suppliers. If you can't do those two things, then you're in trouble. Like everything else from a financial reporting point of view, you've got some flexibility on it. But if you can't get your cash in from your customers and pay your suppliers, then you haven't got long to fix those issues.
No, exactly, and exactly the same in procurement. I mean, never mind all the flash stuff. If one of your colleagues can't raise a purchase request, get it approved, raise a purchase order, and then do a goods receipting and matching, then procurement doesn't work. All the big stuff we want to do, you're never going to get to do it because you're just going to be totally bogged down. So you're absolutely right. Make sure the basic fundamentals of whether it's finance, procurement, or any other function, that it's working, and then you can get everything else gone. But again, that's scope. And do you know what, we forgot to do one thing, which is obviously this topic, like many of the ones that are coming up, thank you to the audience who, even if you're doing it really privately, and I don't know why you don't put it in LinkedIn and you come to us by email and WhatsApp, it's like you're afraid to reveal your interest. Thank you, because obviously anything that we can talk about which is addressing something that you as an audience are facing, look, we'd love to do it. And if we don't know anything about it, do you know what, we'll do a 3-way coffee break with someone who actually knows what they're talking about. So, but hey, ERP, it's difficult, but there are things that you can do like any other software to make sure you don't have a total nightmare.
Okay, well, that's all from us for today, isn't it, Richard?
It is.
Until next time.
It is. And next time, maybe actually we'll manage to be sat having coffee in the same place so we can actually look at one another rather than talking to a screen. That would be nice. But we're going to put up those topics. So please just share. But lovely to see you all again.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.